Daniel was a young hiker who had always loved the forest more than the city. He grew up in a small town surrounded by hills and trees. Ever since he was a boy, he had imagined exploring places that very few people had seen. He dreamed of finding something hidden, a place that seemed forgotten by the world. Daniel often spent his weekends walking along trails and climbing hills, but he always wanted to go further, beyond the roads most travelers took. He believed that nature had secrets, and that he might discover one day a place that felt completely untouched. One morning, Daniel woke up early, just as the first rays of the sun painted the sky in soft colors. The air was fresh and cool, and birds were singing in the distance. He packed his backpack carefully. Inside, he placed a small tent, a bottle of water, some sandwiches, fruits, a first aid kit, and his camera. Daniel also brought a notebook to write down his thoughts and sketches. He wanted to capture everything he would see. After packing, he checked his map once more and chose a path that led deeper into the forest, far away from any known trail. He said goodbye to his friends with a smile. They were always amazed at how brave he was, but Daniel did not think of himself as brave. He just loved exploring and discovering new things. He promised them that he would be safe and would return before sunset. With a final wave, he started walking. The path was narrow and uneven, but he moved carefully. Every step he took made him feel like he was leaving the ordinary world behind. The noises of the city were gone, replaced by the sounds of nature. Leaves rustled under his feet. The wind whispered through the branches and birds sang high above in the trees. As he walked, Daniel noticed how the forest became denser. The sunlight barely touched the ground through the thick branches. Moss covered the rocks, and flowers of different colors appeared between the roots of the trees. It was quiet except for the sounds of small animals and the occasional water stream. Daniel felt a mixture of excitement and calm. There was a strange energy in the forest, something that made him feel he was on the verge of a great discovery. He remembered his grandfather's stories about hidden villages that had remained secret for centuries. Villages where people lived in harmony with nature. Daniel did not know if those stories were true, but he could not shake the feeling that something incredible was waiting for him. Hours passed as Daniel carefully followed the narrow trail. At first it seemed like an ordinary forest path, but then he noticed subtle signs that something was ahead. The ground was worn in places, almost as if people had walked there often. There were small wooden markers and carvings on the trees. Daniel moved quietly and tried to avoid disturbing the area. His curiosity grew with every step. He felt as if the forest itself was guiding him. Suddenly, he saw smoke rising in the distance. It was thin and light, curling slowly into the air. Daniel froze and looked carefully. The smoke came from a place that was hidden behind thick trees. He felt a sudden rush of excitement. Could it be a village? He could not tell for sure. The trail seemed to continue toward the smoke, and he decided to follow it carefully. Every sound made him alert, but he did not feel fear. Instead, he felt a strong sense of purpose. He knew he had stumbled upon something rare. As Daniel got closer, he saw signs of life. There were small clearings with paths made from flat stones and simple fences built from wood. The forest seemed to embrace the village, keeping it hidden from outsiders. Daniel moved slowly, trying to remain unnoticed. He wanted to observe first before revealing himself. From a distance, he could see people walking around. They wore simple clothes made from natural materials. Children played near the water, running and laughing. He saw women tending small gardens and men carrying baskets of fruit. Everything seemed natural, calm, and peaceful. It was unlike any place Daniel had ever seen. Daniel sat behind a large tree and watched quietly. He took out his notebook and began to sketch what he saw. He wanted to remember every detail. The houses were small but well built from wood and clay. Smoke rose gently from the chimneys, and the smell of fresh bread and herbs filled the air faintly. The village seemed alive, but it was quiet in a way that made Daniel feel calm and safe. He could see animals roaming freely, and there were small wooden bridges over little streams. Daniel felt like he had entered a world from the past, a world untouched by modern life. As he observed the villagers, Daniel noticed something else. They were kind and gentle with each other. Children helped each other, and adults spoke with soft voices. Even the animals seemed to trust the people. He realized that the villagers had a way of living in complete harmony with nature. There were no signs of struggle or unhappiness. It was as if they had discovered a secret to life that most of the world had forgotten. Daniel felt amazed and inspired. He had expected to find an old hidden village, but the life inside it was more beautiful and peaceful than he could have imagined. The sun started to lower in the sky, and the golden light made the village glow warmly. Daniel knew he had to be careful because if anyone noticed him, they might feel threatened. He decided to stay hidden until he could understand the village better. He felt that he was witnessing something very special. It was clear to him that this place had been protected from outsiders for a long time. How had it remained hidden? Why had no one discovered it before? Daniel's mind was full of questions, but he also felt a deep respect for the villagers and their way of life. As evening approached, Daniel realized he needed to plan his next steps. He could not stay in the forest all night, but he wanted to learn more about the village. He decided to return to a nearby clearing where he could rest and observe. He found a quiet spot near a stream and set up his small tent. The sound of water running over the stones was calming. He ate a simple meal and thought about what he had seen. Every detail of the village stayed in his mind. He knew that his discovery was extraordinary. Before sleeping, Daniel took out his camera and notebook again. He sketched the paths, the houses, and the people he had seen. He wrote down his feelings and the strange sense of wonder he had experienced. The forest around him was quiet, but he could still see small lights from the village in the distance. He felt a mix of excitement and anticipation for the next day. He knew that the adventure was only beginning, and that what he would see inside the village would be something he could never forget. Daniel closed his eyes, listening to the forest and the gentle sounds of the village. He realized that he had found a place that was more than just a hidden village. It was a world where life moved in harmony with nature, where people lived peacefully and happily. He felt grateful and humble for being able to witness it. The forest seemed alive with secrets, and Daniel felt that he had been chosen to see one of them. He drifted into sleep with a feeling of wonder and anticipation, ready for the journey that awaited him in the hidden village. The next morning, Daniel woke up before the sun had fully risen. The forest was filled with soft light, and the sounds of birds created a calm melody. He packed his small tent and food, ready to take his first steps into the village he had discovered the day before. His heart was full of excitement and nervousness. He knew that he was about to enter a world few people had ever seen, and every step had to be careful and respectful. Daniel followed the narrow path leading from the stream to the village. The ground was soft with moss, and he could hear the distant sounds of people beginning their morning routines. Smoke rose from the chimneys, signaling that the villagers were awake. The smell of fresh bread and herbs floated gently in the air. Daniel felt a mix of curiosity and admiration. He had imagined what it would be like to see such a place, but nothing could have prepared him for the reality. As he stepped closer, he noticed the children playing near a small fountain in the center of the village. They ran freely, laughing and calling to each other. Their joy was pure and simple, and Daniel felt a warmth in his heart watching them. He took out his notebook and began to make quick sketches, trying to capture the movement and happiness of the children. He wanted to remember everything, not just with his camera, but with his own hands. Daniel also noticed the adults beginning their day. Some were carrying baskets of vegetables from their gardens. Others were tending to animals, feeding them or brushing their fur. The villagers worked with care, moving slowly and peacefully. Daniel was amazed at how organized and calm everything seemed. It was clear that this community had found a balance with nature that many people in the outside world had forgotten. Every action, every step seemed thoughtful and purposeful. Carefully, Daniel moved along a hidden path behind the houses. He wanted to observe without being noticed, respecting the privacy of the villagers. As he walked, he saw more details that made the village unique. The houses were made of wood and clay, but each one had a small garden attached. Flowers and herbs grew alongside vegetables, creating a blend of colors and scents. Small stone pathways connected the houses, and little wooden bridges crossed over streams. The village seemed to be alive, but it was alive in a calm and gentle way. Daniel stopped near a small workshop. Inside, an older man was shaping wood into small tools. The man worked quietly, his hands moving skillfully and carefully. Daniel watched in awe. He had seen craftsmen before, but this man's dedication and patience were extraordinary. Every movement seemed natural, almost like it was part of a rhythm with the village itself. Daniel wanted to speak, to ask questions, but he held back. He wanted to understand the village without disturbing its harmony. As he continued exploring, Daniel saw a woman teaching a group of children to weave baskets. The children listened carefully, following her every move. The teacher smiled gently, correcting their hands when needed and praising their progress. Daniel realized that the villagers taught one another in a way that encouraged learning without pressure. There was no rush, no competition. Everyone worked and learned together. The sense of community was stronger than anything he had ever seen. Curiosity led Daniel further into the village. He noticed a small gathering near a pond. People were collecting water, washing clothes, and tending to plants that grew along the edge. The pond reflected the morning sky, and the movements of the villagers were mirrored in its calm surface. Daniel felt a sense of peace he had never experienced in the city. The villagers had created a rhythm of life that was simple, balanced, and connected to the world around them. Daniel took out his camera and started taking pictures, but he did so carefully, making sure not to disturb anyone. Every picture captured the simplicity and beauty of the village. He realized that this was more than just a hidden place. It was a community that had preserved values and ways of life that modern society had mostly forgotten. There was no hurry, no greed, and no conflict. Everything was done with purpose, respect, and care. As the morning passed, Daniel noticed that some villagers were gathering around a large tree in the center of the village. The tree was enormous, with branches that stretched high into the sky. It seemed to be the heart of the village. People placed small offerings at its base, including flowers, fruits, and carefully carved wooden pieces. Daniel understood that the tree was important to the villagers, not just as part of nature, but as a symbol of life, community, and respect for the environment. He felt a deep admiration for their devotion and harmony. While observing, Daniel accidentally stepped on a small branch. The snap echoed slightly and he froze. A villager, a young man, looked toward him. Their eyes met and Daniel immediately raised his hands to show he meant no harm. The young man nodded slowly, a small smile forming on his face. He walked over and spoke in a language Daniel did not understand. Surprisingly, his gestures were kind and welcoming. He pointed to the village and then to Daniel, as if inviting him to follow. Daniel hesitated for a moment, then decided to take the risk. He stepped forward and allowed the young man to guide him into the village. Inside the village, Daniel noticed that the people moved with a quiet confidence. There was no fear of outsiders, but there was also a careful awareness. The villagers seemed to judge Daniel not by his clothes or his appearance, but by his respect and curiosity. They welcomed him not with words, but with gestures, smiles, and patience. Daniel felt a mix of relief and wonder. He realized that trust here was earned through respect and observation, not through promises or rules. The young man led Daniel to a small house with an open door. Inside, the walls were decorated with colorful patterns made from natural pigments. There were shelves filled with handmade tools, bowls, and books. The smell of herbs and fresh wood filled the room. Daniel felt a sense of awe as he looked around. This was not just a home. It was a reflection of a way of life that had been passed down for generations. Every object seemed to have a purpose, and every corner told a story. The young man gestured for Daniel to sit. Daniel obeyed, feeling nervous but excited. The villagers nearby smiled and went back to their work, showing that they accepted him as a guest. Daniel realized that he was witnessing something very rare, a community that lived fully in harmony with itself and with nature. He wanted to learn everything, to understand their ways, and to carry this experience with him forever. As the sun rose higher, Daniel was shown around the village. He saw people preparing food together, sharing stories, and teaching skills to one another. The villagers worked as a team, and there was laughter and kindness in every action. Daniel felt inspired. He realized that the hidden village was not just a place. It was a living lesson in cooperation, patience, and respect for life. He began to understand why this village had remained hidden. It was not about secrecy. It was about protecting a way of life that was precious and fragile. By midday, Daniel had walked through every corner of the village. He had seen children learning, adults working, and elders guiding with wisdom. He had watched animals roam freely and streams being carefully used without waste. Every sight left him more amazed and more respectful. Daniel knew that he would never forget this day. He had stepped into a world that moved at a different pace, a world that reminded him of the beauty of simplicity, the importance of community, and the value of living in harmony with nature. As he sat near the large tree again, Daniel reflected on everything he had seen. The village had welcomed him not with words, but with trust and example. He realized that what he had discovered was rare, and he felt both honored and humbled. This first day inside the village had shown him the surface of something much deeper, a world full of wisdom and beauty. Daniel knew that he had only begun to understand this place, and that the next days would bring lessons and experiences he could never have imagined. Daniel woke up early again, feeling a mix of excitement and curiosity. The forest outside was quiet, with morning sunlight filtering through the tall trees. Today he decided to learn more about the villagers, their daily life, and their unique way of living. He packed a small bag with water, some fruit, and his notebook. He wanted to take notes carefully, but he also wanted to observe without disturbing anyone. He walked toward the center of the village where the large tree stood. The villagers were already active, starting their day with calm and purposeful movements. Daniel noticed that their work was not just about survival. Every task, from tending gardens to carrying water, seemed to have meaning. He felt a growing respect for their way of life. It was clear that everything in this village was connected. People, animals, and nature worked together in harmony. As Daniel observed, he saw a group of elders gathering near a small circle of stones. They were talking quietly among themselves and pointing to different parts of the village. Daniel realized that these elders guided the community with knowledge passed down through generations. Their advice was valued, and the younger villagers listened carefully. Daniel wondered what stories and lessons they carried. He felt that these people had wisdom far beyond what he had seen in modern towns and cities. A young girl noticed Daniel standing nearby. She smiled and waved. Daniel hesitated at first, but then returned the gesture. To his surprise, the girl walked toward him and held out her hand as if inviting him to follow. Daniel understood the gesture and walked carefully behind her. She led him to a small open space where several villagers were gathered. Daniel watched quietly as they began to prepare for a special activity. He could feel the excitement in the air. This was something different from their daily work, and he was eager to learn what it could be. The villagers began by arranging objects made from natural materials, small wooden bowls, stones, and colorful leaves. Daniel noticed that everything was organized carefully. The elders spoke softly, and the villagers responded with attention and respect. Daniel realized that this was not just a simple task. It was a tradition, a practice that had been followed for generations. He felt honored to witness it and wanted to understand its purpose. One of the elders noticed Daniel and gestured for him to come closer. Daniel approached slowly and bowed slightly, showing his respect. The elder smiled kindly and motioned for Daniel to sit. Daniel took a place on the soft grass, feeling both nervous and excited. The elder then began to explain the significance of the activity through gestures, simple words, and patience. Daniel understood that this was a way for the villagers to honor the forest and the life within it. Every movement and object represented care, gratitude, and balance. Daniel watched closely as the villagers performed their task. They moved with grace and attention, placing objects in precise patterns. He noticed that even the smallest actions had meaning. For example, when a child placed a leaf in the circle, an elder would nod and offer gentle guidance. The rhythm of their actions created a sense of unity, and Daniel felt as if he was part of something larger than himself. He realized that this village did not only survive in harmony with nature, but also celebrated it in every action. After the activity, the villagers gathered near the large tree again. Daniel saw that they placed small offerings at its base. These offerings included fruits, flowers, and objects crafted carefully by hand. Daniel understood that the tree was the heart of the village, a symbol of life, growth, and protection. The villagers spoke softly to one another and seemed to listen for responses from nature itself. Daniel felt a deep sense of peace. The way they treated the tree reflected their values: respect, gratitude, and connection. The young girl who had first approached him walked beside Daniel. She motioned toward a small stream where the villagers were washing their hands and utensils. Daniel followed and noticed how carefully they used the water. Not a drop was wasted. He realized that in this village every resource was valued and used with care. People lived simply, but they lived fully. Daniel felt inspired by their awareness and thoughtfulness. He had never seen such mindfulness in modern life. Later, Daniel was invited by another villager to help in the garden. He hesitated at first, but the villagers' kind gestures encouraged him. Daniel joined in carefully, planting small herbs and watering vegetables. The experience was simple, yet it was full of learning. The villager showed him how each plant was cared for differently, how soil, sunlight, and water were balanced. Daniel realized that this village thrived because people understood nature deeply and respected it. Every task, no matter how small, contributed to the life of the community. As the day progressed, Daniel saw children learning traditional skills. They practiced weaving, pottery, and simple carpentry. An elder guided them patiently, correcting mistakes gently and praising progress. Daniel was amazed at the calm and supportive way they taught one another. There was no rush or competition, only learning with care and respect. He thought about how different this was from schools in modern towns. Here, education was connected to life, work, and the environment. Every lesson had a purpose, and every child felt valued. In the afternoon, Daniel was led to a small hill overlooking the village. From this vantage point, he could see the entire settlement. The houses, the gardens, the streams, and the people moving about created a beautiful and balanced picture. Daniel realized how carefully the village had been built. Every house had its place, every path had a purpose, and every garden was tended with care. He understood that this harmony was not accidental. It was the result of generations living thoughtfully and with respect for each other and the land. As the sun began to lower in the sky, Daniel noticed villagers gathering once more near the large tree. He understood that this was a moment of reflection and gratitude. The elders spoke softly. Children listened, and everyone seemed connected to something greater than themselves. Daniel felt a sense of awe. He had never witnessed a community with such respect, balance, and understanding. Every action, every word, every gesture reflected a deep awareness of life and harmony. Daniel took out his notebook and began to write about his observations. He described the daily life, the traditions, and the way people interacted with each other and nature. He drew sketches of the village layout, the large tree, the gardens, and the small workshops. Daniel knew that these notes would be valuable not just for memory, but as a record of something truly unique. He wanted to remember everything in detail so he could share the lesson of this village with others while respecting its secrecy. As evening approached, Daniel helped with small tasks around the village. He carried water, collected firewood, and assisted in preparing a simple meal. Each action, although small, gave him a better understanding of the community. He realized that life here was not about rush or competition, but about cooperation, care, and purpose. Every person, no matter their age, contributed in a meaningful way. Daniel felt grateful to be allowed to participate and learn. When the sun finally set, the villagers gathered near the large tree again. Soft lights glowed from small fires, and the sounds of gentle songs filled the air. Daniel felt a deep sense of peace and belonging. He had discovered more than a hidden village. He had found a living example of harmony, respect, and community. The lessons he learned today would stay with him forever. He knew that he had only begun to understand the depth and wisdom of this remarkable place. Before sleeping, Daniel sat quietly near his tent, reflecting on everything he had seen. The village had welcomed him not just with gestures but with trust and teaching. He realized that the villagers lived fully and meaningfully in every moment. Their way of life was simple, yet filled with purpose and care. Daniel closed his eyes, feeling a sense of wonder and anticipation for what he would discover the next day. He understood that this journey was more than just exploration. It was a lesson in life itself. Daniel woke up to the soft sounds of the forest. Birds chirped, and the sunlight gently filtered through the trees. Today he felt a sense of excitement. He had learned about the villagers' daily life, their cooperation and respect for nature. But he sensed that there were deeper traditions, secrets that had been preserved for generations. He wanted to understand them without disturbing the balance of the village. After a simple breakfast of fresh fruits and bread offered by one of the villagers, Daniel walked toward the large tree at the center of the village. People were already gathering there, moving calmly and purposefully. Children carried small baskets of flowers and adults brought water and herbs. Daniel noticed the elders standing together, speaking softly and gesturing to the younger villagers. He realized that something important was about to happen. A young boy noticed Daniel watching and came toward him, smiling. He pointed to a small circle of stones near the tree and motioned for Daniel to sit. Daniel obeyed, feeling both nervous and honored. From his position, he could see the entire village gathering. The atmosphere was filled with a sense of calm focus. He understood that this was a special moment for the villagers, something that connected them to their history and the forest around them. The eldest woman of the village stepped forward. She carried a small wooden box, decorated with patterns made from colored clay. The villagers watched silently as she opened it, revealing small objects that appeared to be carefully crafted symbols. Daniel could see that each item was different and carried significance. The elders then began to explain, using gestures and simple words, the meaning of each object. Daniel realized that these were symbols of life, respect, and community. Each one represented a value that guided the villagers in their daily lives. Daniel observed carefully as the elders demonstrated how the villagers honored the objects. They placed them on the ground near the large tree and moved in a circle, touching each object gently and speaking softly. Children watched closely, learning the proper way to respect the items. Adults followed the elders' example, showing patience, attention, and reverence. Daniel felt a sense of wonder. This was more than tradition. It was a living lesson about respect, connection, and mindfulness. After the ceremony, Daniel followed a group of villagers to a hidden part of the forest he had not yet seen. The path was narrow and covered with leaves, almost invisible to anyone who was not careful. Daniel felt the thrill of discovery once again. The young boy led him to a small clearing where sunlight created patterns on the forest floor. In the center were several stones arranged in a circle. Around the stones were carvings and drawings that Daniel had never seen before. The villagers began to explain their meaning through gestures and drawings on the ground. Daniel learned that the carvings represented the history of the village and its connection to the forest. Each symbol told a story of balance, cooperation, and respect. The villagers believed that understanding these stories helped them live in harmony with nature and one another. Daniel felt amazed at how much thought and care had gone into preserving this knowledge. He realized that these traditions were not only cultural but also practical, teaching lessons about life and survival without harming the environment. The young boy showed Daniel how to carefully add a small stone to the circle. The elders smiled and nodded, acknowledging his participation. Daniel felt a deep sense of inclusion. He understood that the villagers were not only teaching him about their traditions, but also sharing trust and responsibility. Every gesture, every action had meaning. Daniel felt honored to be part of it, even in a small way. As the afternoon passed, Daniel was invited to help in another activity. This time, he worked with a group of villagers to prepare natural dyes from plants and flowers. He learned how different leaves and roots could create colors for weaving and painting. The villagers showed patience, guiding his hands gently and explaining the process carefully. Daniel was amazed at their knowledge of nature and their ability to use it creatively and respectfully. He realized that their traditions were deeply connected to the environment. While working, Daniel noticed that children were also learning. They practiced making small patterns with colored threads guided by older villagers. Daniel observed how each child received attention, encouragement, and careful instruction. There was no rush, no pressure, only guidance and support. Daniel thought about how different this was from his own childhood, where learning often felt hurried or competitive. Here, learning was a natural and joyful part of life. Later, Daniel was shown a small underground room. It was cool and quiet, with shelves filled with more objects, drawings, and tools. The elder explained that this was a place where the villagers kept their history and knowledge. Daniel carefully examined the objects, noticing how every item had a story. Some were gifts from nature. Some were made by villagers long ago. Every item was preserved with care. Daniel realized that the villagers' wisdom was not written in books but lived in their daily life and objects. As evening approached, the villagers gathered once more near the large tree. They lit small fires and began a quiet song, a melody that flowed gently through the village. Daniel listened, feeling the harmony of voices, nature, and life. The song seemed to connect everyone to the forest, to the sky, and to one another. Daniel felt a sense of belonging, even though he was a visitor. He understood that the villagers' traditions were not only about learning, but also about creating connection, gratitude, and peace. Daniel spent time talking to the young boy who had guided him earlier. Through gestures and simple words, he learned more about daily life and special customs. He understood that the villagers celebrated the seasons, honored the forest, and supported one another in every way. Daniel realized that their way of life was simple but meaningful. Every action, every gesture, and every tradition had a purpose. The community was not only surviving but thriving in balance with the world around them. Before nightfall, Daniel helped with the final tasks of the day. He carried small baskets of food, helped gather water, and assisted in arranging objects near the tree for the evening ceremony. Every moment gave him a better understanding of the villagers' care and mindfulness. He felt grateful for the trust they had shown him and the lessons they had shared. Daniel realized that this village was a treasure, not just for him but for the world, as a living example of respect, balance, and wisdom. When he finally returned to his small tent, Daniel felt a mix of exhaustion and awe. The day had been full of learning, observation, and participation. He wrote in his notebook describing the traditions, the carvings, the songs, and the ceremonies. He sketched the patterns and symbols he had seen, determined to remember every detail. Daniel understood that this knowledge was rare and valuable, not just as a story but as a lesson in life. Respect and connection. Before sleeping, Daniel sat quietly near the large tree, listening to the forest and the gentle hum of the village. He reflected on the day and realized that he had learned more than he had ever imagined. The villagers had shared their secrets, their wisdom, and their traditions without words, simply through example, gestures, and trust. Daniel knew that the lessons of this hidden village would stay with him forever. He understood that the beauty of life was not in speed or wealth, but in respect, balance, and harmony. Daniel closed his eyes, feeling a sense of peace and wonder. He was no longer just a visitor. He had become part of the rhythm of the village, even if only for a short time. He knew that tomorrow would bring more learning, more experiences, and perhaps even deeper understanding of the hidden traditions that made this village a place of magic, wisdom, and life. The morning sun slowly rose over the forest, filling the hidden village with soft golden light. Daniel woke up with a sense of anticipation. He had already spent several days observing and learning the villagers' ways, but today, he felt that something remarkable awaited him. He packed a small bag with water, some fruits, and his notebook. He wanted to capture everything he saw and felt. Today, he hoped to understand the village in a way that went beyond simple observation. As he walked toward the large tree at the center of the village, Daniel noticed that the villagers were already gathering. Their movements were calm and purposeful. Children carried small baskets of flowers and herbs, while adults arranged objects with careful precision. Daniel felt a sense of awe. The rhythm of life in this village was unlike anything he had ever experienced. Every action seemed to be part of a greater plan, a way of connecting people, nature, and tradition. An elder noticed Daniel approaching and smiled kindly. She gestured for him to come closer. Daniel moved forward, careful and respectful. The villagers seemed to sense that today was special. The elder placed her hands together, then pointed to Daniel, welcoming him to participate. Daniel felt honored. He realized that the villagers did not simply allow him to observe. They were inviting him to be part of something meaningful. The villagers began a quiet ceremony. Daniel watched as they arranged objects made from wood, stone, and plants around the base of the large tree. Each object was placed with care, and each action carried significance. The elder spoke softly, explaining through gestures the meaning of the ceremony. Daniel understood that this was a way for the villagers to honor the forest, the animals, and the life that surrounded them. Every movement reflected respect, gratitude, and harmony. Daniel was invited to add a small object to the circle. He chose a smooth stone he had found near a stream. Holding it carefully, he placed it alongside the others. The villagers smiled and nodded. Daniel felt a deep sense of connection. He realized that this simple act symbolized much more than it appeared. It represented trust, inclusion, and participation in a community that valued every individual. Daniel understood that the village's strength lay not in its size or resources, but in the unity, respect, and mindfulness of its people. After the ceremony, Daniel was guided to a small clearing surrounded by ancient trees. The young boy who had first welcomed him motioned for him to sit on a soft patch of grass. Daniel noticed that other villagers were sitting in a circle as well. The elders began to tell stories. These were not ordinary stories. They were tales of the forest, of animals, of seasons, and of the village itself. Daniel watched and listened carefully. Each story carried a lesson, teaching patience, respect, and understanding. Daniel learned about the village's origins, about how their ancestors had come to this hidden place and made a promise to live in harmony with nature. He discovered how the villagers had learned to read the signs of the forest, to care for plants and animals, and to understand the delicate balance of life. Daniel was amazed at their knowledge. Every story was a piece of wisdom, and he realized that the village had preserved knowledge that many people in the modern world had forgotten. The elders then invited Daniel to participate in a special activity. He was to help care for a small group of young animals. Daniel approached gently. The villagers taught him how to feed them, guide them, and protect them without causing fear. Daniel felt a strong connection to the animals. He realized that the villagers' way of life was based on empathy, care, and understanding. It was not just about survival, but about living fully and responsibly with all beings. Later in the day, Daniel walked with the young boy to a stream that ran through the village. The water was clear and cool. Daniel learned how the villagers used the water carefully, making sure not to waste a single drop. They washed tools, collected drinking water, and tended to plants, all with attention and respect. Daniel realized that even the simplest actions carried meaning and purpose. Every moment in the village was an opportunity to learn, to respect, and to connect. As the afternoon sun began to lower, Daniel was shown a hidden part of the forest. The young boy led him to a small hill with a breathtaking view. From there, Daniel could see the entire village surrounded by the forest. The houses, gardens, and streams created a harmonious picture. The villagers were moving calmly, working, playing, and learning. Daniel understood that the hidden village was not just a physical place, but a living example of balance, unity, and mindfulness. He felt a deep sense of gratitude for being allowed to witness it. In the evening, the villagers gathered near the large tree once again. Fires were lit and soft songs filled the air. Daniel watched as children carried small offerings and placed them carefully near the tree. Adults joined in, and the elders guided the process with gentle hands. Daniel realized that these rituals were not for show, but for connection. They strengthened bonds between the villagers, the forest, and all living beings. Daniel felt honored to participate and understood the importance of preserving such traditions. Before leaving the circle, one of the elders placed her hand on Daniel's shoulder and nodded. He felt a deep sense of understanding and acceptance. The village had shared its secrets, its traditions, and its wisdom. Daniel knew that this experience would stay with him forever. He realized that the greatest lesson of the hidden village was not only about harmony with nature, but also about living with purpose, care, and respect for every being. As night fell, Daniel returned to his small tent. The sky was filled with stars and the sounds of the forest surrounded him. He thought about everything he had seen, the children learning, the elders teaching, the careful work, and the ceremonies. Daniel realized that this village had changed him. He had come in search of adventure, but he was leaving with knowledge, inspiration, and a sense of peace he had never known before. He wrote in his notebook, describing the village, the traditions, and the lessons he had learned. He sketched the layout, the large tree, the ceremonies, and the animals. Daniel wanted to remember every detail so that he could share the story without revealing the village's exact location. He understood that the true value of the village lay in its wisdom and harmony, not in being discovered by the outside world. Before sleeping, Daniel sat quietly near the tree. The villagers were resting and the forest was calm. He reflected on the days he had spent in the hidden village. He realized that he had been part of something extraordinary, something rare and beautiful. The village was a living lesson in life, teaching patience, respect, and connection. Daniel knew that this experience would guide him for the rest of his life. As he closed his eyes, Daniel felt a deep sense of peace and gratitude. The hidden village had shared its secrets with him, not through words alone, but through actions, trust, and example. He understood that life was not about rushing, competing, or accumulating, but about caring, learning, and living in balance with the world. Daniel knew that the lessons he had learned here would forever influence the way he saw life, nature, and community. The night passed quietly, with the gentle sounds of the forest surrounding him. Daniel felt that the hidden village had given him a gift that no one could take away. He had discovered not only a place of beauty and tradition, but also the meaning of harmony, respect, and mindful living. The experience would stay with him forever, guiding his choices, his actions, and his thoughts. By morning, Daniel prepared to leave. He packed his small bag, careful not to leave anything behind. The young boy and the elders waved him goodbye with warm smiles. Daniel thanked them silently, bowing his head in respect. As he walked back through the forest, he looked over his shoulder one last time. The village seemed to glow softly in the morning light, a hidden world of wisdom and life. He felt that he had been part of something extraordinary, and he carried the lessons of the village in his heart. As Daniel returned to his own world, he knew that nothing would ever feel the same. He had seen a place where people lived fully, kindly, and in balance with nature. He had witnessed traditions that connected generations, strengthened communities, and honored life itself. Daniel understood that the hidden village was more than a location. It was a living story, a guide for anyone willing to observe, learn, and respect. From that day on, Daniel's life was changed. He carried the lessons of the hidden village in every action he took and every choice he made. He remembered the children, the elders, the animals, and the forests. He shared stories carefully, not to reveal the location, but to inspire others to respect nature, value community, and live with mindfulness. The hidden village had given him a gift that would remain forever, a lesson in life that no one could take away, a story that haunted him with beauty, wisdom, and the quiet power of living fully.